Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compile Swift podcast. I'm your host, Peter Whittam. In this podcast, we talk about everything related to Apple platforms and Apple development, including macOS, iOS, iPadOS, watchOS, tvOS, and any other OS they've invented this week. So with that, let's get on with the show. In this episode, and it's been a crazy time, WWDC has just wrapped up, WWDC 20's just wrapped up. So we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to do a bit of a developer journal this week as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. So if you even have the remotest of interest in Apple's platforms, you will not have failed to have heard all the news by now, I'm sure, from WWDC, but I'm going to talk about a couple of things that I think just really important for us to Swift developers. Firstly, there's the new, hardware. There's, Apple's new silicon. They're not calling it ARM hardware, but it's, Apple SoC as they're calling it, and it's basically ARM hardware, right? It's their own chips. But it's very interesting, and I think we all sort of knew this was coming at some point, and now that it's finally here, it's actually going to be an interesting time. We're going to go through this transition like we did before, but it's not going to be as rough, right? When we went from the PowerPC chips to Intel, that was kind of rough, but I think that this one's going to be a lot smoother and a lot easier. Certainly, if you paid attention to a lot of the sessions from WWDC talking about the new silicon, it's going to be a lot easier to port your software across, and Apple's going to be helping you there, of course. So that's interesting news. But what a massive year I think it is for Swift UI, right? We've got these new widgets that we can build and, for home screens on iOS and on iPadOS. And on macOS as well, for that matter. And they're all Swift UI based. We've also got, custom complications on the Apple Watch, building Swift UI. So, it's a massive year for Swift UI. It really is. On top of that, we've got a collection views and kind of this grid layout that I think we've all been wanting, and just so many things. So there's that. Xcode 12 has a massive amount of new features as well. I've played around with it briefly, and I'll probably do some videos at some point, but I'm really liking Xcode 12. A lot of the features, especially a lot of the sort of the tools that they've put in place and the changes that they've made to make it a lot easier to work with Swift UI views. So there's that. Swift, of course, is a little different. It's kind of interesting, right? Because this mostly open source platform that Swift has, you tend to know what's coming, and, it's not so massive a news dub like it has been in the past. But, there's a lot of interesting things going on with Swift as well. So for that, I would say definitely look at the sessions from the Apple videos. I know I have an extensive list that I've picked from. And in fact, if you subscribe to the Compile Swift newsletter, and you should, go to compileswift.com and look for the link there for the newsletter. But I actually listed all the videos that I think are going to be important for us as Swift developers. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Like I say, you should definitely sign up for the newsletter. I don't spam you to death with it, but when there's important things, I do send one out. So there's that. And it just was a really good format, I thought, this year. We really didn't know how WWDC was going to go, but I really liked it. And actually, I feel like I want it to be this way in the future from Apple. And that's not to criticize the old system, but one of the nice thing about all these pre-recorded videos was, firstly, the presentation was flawless, of course. But secondly, it was so slick and so smooth. And you didn't have a lot of the sort of the filler fluff that you have to, kind of sit through a lot of the time with these things. And there was no silly demos from companies, and that's not to knock any of the companies that done them before, but they're always kind of, you get these companies come along, do a demo of something, and then you never hear from it again, and it's just a waste of time, to be honest. So I really liked the new format. The one thing, of course, we didn't have was the person-to-person interaction, and I think what would be great next year if Apple took a same format as this year, but maybe tacked on like another week afterwards or something like that, for a in-person conference where you just get together. Maybe, do the labs in person or something like that so we can all get together. But I really enjoyed this new format. the Apple developer tool or software that they have on their platforms for the conference, for the videos and that's a little frustrating to work with, but, I'm kind of looking at that as a work in progress all the time, and hopefully it'll get better. So that's a DC this year. I'm not going to go into any further details than that, really. Like I say, if you're, working on any of the platforms, you've gone to the developer portal by now and paid attention to what's going on there. So when I come back after the break, I want to do kind of a developer journal of what I've been working on over the past couple of weeks, and kind of where I'm at and where I see my time going forward on some of my projects.
Time for a break.
Let's talk about Spotify for a second. I've been a long time, many-year user of Spotify Premium, but there's also a free version you can use, so it won't cost you anything. And one of the things that I love about Spotify is I can combine all of my music from the massive library that they have, along with all of the podcasts that I listen to. And you obviously like podcasts because you're listening to this one. So on Spotify, you can follow your favorite podcasts to make sure that you never miss an episode. They're just delivered right to you. And it's also super easy to share with other people. I'm always sharing on Instagram and all the other social networks on my devices, things that I listen to on Spotify. So go ahead and download the Spotify app today and search for the Compile Swift podcast. It's in there along with all the other podcasts you like to listen to, I'm sure. So go ahead and download the Spotify app today.
Break time over.
So one of the things that I like to do this time of year is, take the advantage of the kind of the reset that we have from the Apple Developer Conference and, reflect upon what I think I want to learn going forward and what I'm working on and how these new technologies may come into play with that. So one of the things I did, of course, I downloaded the Xcode 12 beta, and I really like it. There's a lot of things in there I like. I'm not going to go into detail in that. That's a future episode, probably some videos and blog posts on that as well. But I really like it. Now, to really take advantage of some of those new features, though, you really have to be running the beta of Big Sur, the next macOS version as well. Debatable at this point, but it seems to be it's going to be macOS 11, by the way. So that's interesting. So the first thing I did was I installed it on an external drive because I wanted to not have any, link between my production machine, right? Kind of my personal production machine and my, and any betas. And because that's just never a good plan, especially in these early releases. So what I did was I cloned my machine 10.15.5 onto an external drive and then did the upgrade that way. And it took a long time, of course, being an external drive, but I did get it working. But the other one that I wanted to do was I finally upgraded to Parallels for Mac 15, and I haven't used that software for a few versions. Not because I think there's anything wrong with it. I'm a huge Parallels fan, always have been. But, I saw it as an opportunity to do a few other things I wanted to do, and Parallels was the way to go with that. So, interestingly, I managed to finally get Big Sur running in a Parallels VM, and I'll probably do a video on that at some point. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me on Twitter @CompileSwift and let me know that that's something that you think it would be a good idea, because it's not straightforward to do it. And there are some complications, but it took me a few days of trying different methods to get it to work. But I do now have a working virtual machine, so I don't even have to boot from my external hard drive with the install if I don't want to, and running in a Parallels VM. It's not as fast, obviously, because right now it's not like Parallels really supports, Big Sur, but I did get it working. So once I'd got all that done, that gave me an opportunity to play around with some of the new technologies and, bring in some of my personal apps and look and see what kind of work I may have to do and things that I can take advantage of there and identify those. So I kind of have a to-do list of bug fixes and improvements that I can make with the new releases. Obviously, I've got a lot of time on that because they're just personal projects. Now, one thing that I did spend a lot of time with this week, though, is in my after I'd finished the day job, in my evening hours, I have been reading a lot about Combine because I've been paying attention to it, but I hadn't really used it. And I found that with one of my personal apps, I was having a bit of a frustration with some code that I'd written And I just felt there was a better way. And I thought, maybe Combine is the way to go. And it is looking that way. So this week I've been reading a couple of books. I have Donnie Wall's book, which is just fantastic, Practical Combine. And then I have a Ray Wenderlich one as well. So I've been reading through both of those books and, kind of understanding how it works. I've been using reactive programming before in other languages, so it's not like it was completely new to me, but Combine over, say like RX Swift, for example, is very interesting. And I've got nothing against RX Swift. I intend to continue using that as well. But Combine being built by Apple, of course, means it's a first-class citizen in everything that, you do. And it's so built into, the frameworks at this point that you almost cannot ignore it. It's certainly if you do Swift UI, I mean, you may not realize it, but you're using Combine. It's with Swift UI. So I spent a lot of time with Combine this week, and I think that's a very interesting way to solve a lot of problems, not only with asynchronous programming, but just, the approach to how you think about the logic of your applications and the way that works with the data and your UI. And with that, something else this week that I've been working with a lot is refactoring one of my personal applications into more of an MVVM, a model view model approach rather than MVC. And it's not something I particularly had paid attention to before, but once I had started using it and adapting my code, it makes a lot of sense. And I really do get what people are talking about. So if you've not looked at MVVM, it actually is a really smart way of solving some of the problems, having this extra view model sitting there, translating the model data for you for the view, instead of having these, heavy controllers doing it for you. So that's something that you may want to look at. So that's been, what I've been working on the past couple of weeks. And I think I'm probably going to do some more of these developer journal type reports for you all, because it's really interesting and it's a good way to not only keep me honest and, tell you what I'm working on, but also it's a good way to keep me working on things. It's all too easy sometimes when you have busy periods to let your personal skills and development and projects kind of slip into the background, especially in times like now with all these other areas needing our focus. So it's good to have some kind of regular pattern where I say, okay, you know what, this week I'm going to spend X amount of hours looking at this thing or solving this problem. So, let me know what you think. Go to compileswift.com/contact or reach out to me on Twitter and at compileswift and let me know. I really like this idea of developer journals in podcasts. I've seen a few other people doing it, and it's really nice to sort of sit here and talk through some of these things that I work on and some problems that I'm having and all of that kind of stuff. And to feel like I'm sitting here having the conversation with someone about it. It helps me think through the process. So, that's it for now. Usual thing, of course, like, subscribe, tell someone about this. If you think it's going to be helpful, please reach out to me. I love talking with the community. It's just fantastic to talk with you all out there. And I appreciate all the feedback and conversations that I've had with everybody. It just really makes my day to, even when someone just says, thank you for doing what you do, it really makes a huge difference. And if you could leave a review, fantastic, even better. It just serves to help through those times when it's difficult to get episodes out because of workload. So take care of yourselves, stay safe out there, and I will speak to you again soon.